Welcome back, everyone, to another session of Ask the Editor. I am super excited to be here today with Paula Whyman. So I am having a little bit of internet.
You're frozen.
All right. Sorry, guys, I'm having a little bit of technical issues. So I'm still here. You're just looking at my photo. Sorry about that. And hopefully I will be able to come back to it. But anyway, Paula is here. Paula is amazing. She's being very patient as I deal with all my little bugs here. And Paula is the editor of Scoundrel Time, an online magazine. And I will turn it over to Paula to let us know, tell us what prompted you when you started the magazine and what prompted you to start it.
Well, it started with the 2016 presidential election. Back then I was still on Facebook, and I think it was the day after the election, Mikhail Yassel, who is the founder of the Summer Literary Seminars, if anyone knows about that, he posted something on Facebook saying there should be an outlet, a place for artists and writers to go and react to what is happening. And there was so much going on at that time, if you probably remember, and everyone was looking for a way to act, something they could do. And I saw his call. I had never met him in person, and I just said, I'll do this, I'll help. And so he came up with the concept, and I became the editor. And then within a few weeks, I had registered the journal as a nonprofit and
Wow.
set things up, and we started bringing on other staff, and we started with website design, and we started soliciting work, and it was a very fast process. It's really crazy to think now. We just celebrated our 5th anniversary, which seems amazing to me.
Congratulations.
I just really, thank you. Really incredible. I just had no idea then how long this, how long we would do it. I just didn't have any thoughts about that. I've been an editor in various capacities for a long time. So this was something I knew I could do. I knew I could be an editor, and it was the only thing I could think to do at that time when there was much upheaval. And I don't know if you remember. Well, so we launched at the beginning of 2017 with Karen Bender as fiction editor, and Mark Svenvold was our original poetry editor. And about, I guess, 5 months in, he rolled off and Daisy Freed came on. So she's been with us since that time. And I want to mention a few staff members, because Francesca Filippi, who does our all our web posting, has been with us since the very beginning. and so she's obviously an incredibly patient woman. Heather Hughes, one of our poetry readers, has also been with us since the very beginning. And it's just, I'm saying that because I think it's unusual. We're all volunteers. We don't get any compensation for this. Everyone has full-time jobs, other things that they're doing, their own books that they're writing. And so it's an incredible act of, passion, energy, enthusiasm on the part of the staff. And I really want to name all of them for a minute. Joshua Zettler is our newest social media maven, who is very enthusiastic. Megana Mysore is doing many of our author interviews now. We have, and she's also reading fiction. Glorious Piner is also reading poetry. I'm going to leave someone out. Ellie Paulini does occasional interviews for us. Our contributing editors, Dave Singleton and Robert Anthony Siegel, and our recent, Peter Trachtenberg was our publisher. He took over when Mikhail went on to other projects. And then Peter got too busy, but so he is still attached to the journal, but we don't have a named publisher at the moment. But that's fine.
That's great.
It's a really great group, and I really love working with Daisy and Karen. We really complement each other, and we give each other a lot of autonomy. So we can talk more about that. But I did want to say, so we launched the week after the inauguration in January of 2017, and we really didn't know what would happen. But since then, well, we started out publishing a few times a week, and that turned out to be a lot. And we were also publishing at the time resources and information about things that were going on, like current events and things that we thought everybody wanted to act on and everyone wanted to know about. And that was sort of a high burnout thing to do because there was so much at once, if you recall. So we finally decided, things evolved, and we decided that there were other outlets that really were set up to do that really very well. And we didn't need to do that. What we could offer our readers was art. And that's what we were going to be best at. And we decided to focus on that, to provide an outlet that encouraged artists and writers to engage with and respond to the threats that we saw in the world around us to respond through their art. And so we still have that as our sort of guiding mission. And I guess at the core of our work, we believe in the power of art, in the power of stories to help remind people of their common humanity, which is something we need right now, that reminder, and have needed for a long time, especially in scary times like this, when so much that is important, so much that we care about continues to be at risk.
Yeah. And now, was that early work all about Trump, or was it sort of more broad in its coverage?
No, it was more broad. There were some, I suppose there were some pointed pieces. We published a really wonderful piece about, and I'm not going to remember all of them, so I hate to name people because we've literally published nearly 500 pieces in 5 years. But we had a piece about fascism and humor early on. We had a piece about about other totalitarian leaders, let's put it that way, comparing them to what we found, the situation we found ourselves in, and warning signs and things like that. And actually, not too long ago, maybe a couple of years now, we had a piece by Roxana Robinson about Trump and the criminal culture that was pretty popular analysis. But for the most part, we tried not to even say that name in the work that we presented. Now, certainly some of the time we did when it was appropriate, but we didn't think that one person was the only problem, and was not the beginning of the problem. And we felt that there were lots of, well, I call it people, landscapes, and cultures under threat that had been for a long time. And we saw Scoundrel Time as a place where people could write around those themes. And I mean, if you want, I can get into, I asked Karen and Daisy to give me a little more information about what they looked for. So if you want, I can I can give you that. So Daisy said she looks for poems with what she called political weather. So we're not looking for polemics or diatribes or just, so she goes on to say, poems that might do any of the following: express social concern and a conscience, have something to do with the news or material that's written inside of history and responds to external events and maybe is aware of who has power over whom. She says she interprets these parameters broadly, and if she sees a really good poem, she'll figure out why she thinks it has a political angle, which is, it's interesting, right? She thinks a lot of the poetry we publish simply has an awareness of individual experience as it intersects with community experience, which I think is a really good description. And that part where she says she'll figure out why she thinks it has a political angle really resonates with me, because sometimes I'll read something and it doesn't have to be overt. That's the point. I suppose you could make the argument that everything has a political angle because we're all writing in this context. But there is something different. There is a kernel there in the pieces we publish that I think people will see when they read the work. That is very much what Daisy describes. And then Karen, our fiction editor, Karen Bender, says, trust the strange. The unique ways a writer can have a take on a social issue or something going on in current events. Don't be didactic. Be honest, be funny, be sad, be realistic or surreal, be new. Bring us into the narrative that gives a window into an individual, a world. And then she adds that a lot of what we get is fine, but not related to our theme, which, you know, we do reject work that is good because we don't see that angle. And I'll say a little bit about essays. Backing up, we publish poetry, fiction, creative nonfiction, visual art, graphic nonfiction and fiction, humor, and even occasionally music. We once published an excerpt from a libretto. For essays, this is not quite as abstract as what Daisy and Karen were saying, that I'd like to see more creative nonfiction about the environment. I'd like to see some pieces from people about the struggles that kids are having right now, teenagers and kids, the struggles parents are having right now, pieces from people who are immune compromised or on the spectrum or otherwise differently abled or chronically ill. I'd like to see writing from Indigenous writers, from people whose voices are historically underrepresented in the arts. And I want to be clear that when I say I want to see writing by someone, that work can be about anything, as long as it relates to our broad theme. I want to hear your distinctive voice writing about what you care about.
Can you talk about the decision to have so many different categories on your site? I thought that was really remarkable that you publish fiction, nonfiction, poetry, and also humor, which is great. I love to see Lit Mags publishing humor, especially a political magazine that has a humor. You know, I think we absolutely need more humor. And then also music. I don't know really any other. There must be a couple.
You broke up there.
There must be a couple other Lit Mags out there that do music, but they're really very few. Okay, there we go. I just paused recording for a second. But can you talk about your decision to publish music?
Oh, sure. Well, we would love to do more of that. We haven't done a whole lot. The libretto we published was, it was blues based, and the story behind it had to do with police killings of Black men and women.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought it was really a wonderful and important work. And so we felt privileged to be able to publish an excerpt from that. So I would like to see more work. We don't get a lot of music submitted. It has to be original, because one of the things that happens when we've had a couple of people submit essays about music, which is also great, but when you quote from published lyrics, you have to get permission. So that makes it complicated. And so we would love to publish more music. I didn't want to limit us to the written word, because I think every form of art has something to say about, and in this particular moment, I personally like looking at publications where you see all of those dimensions. When we've had a couple of live events, not since COVID, but before COVID, we had a couple of live events in Brooklyn, and we had people reading their work that had been in the journal. We had live music, and we had an endless loop slideshow of art that had been on the site, and it was like this multi-dimensional evening. And that's kind of what I want the experience of the journal to be like. We need a better website for it to work really well, but I would like a visit to the website to be that, to present that possibility of a multi-dimensional arts experience.
So I'm curious, what advice would you give to a writer that has a really strong feeling about something and wants to channel it into a piece of writing, but also wants to make it beautiful and artful? And how do they find that sweet spot? How do they look at their own work and judge whether they're hitting the mark? Because I think tension in the past.
Question, isn't
Yeah,
it?
I mean, it's so interesting, because obviously, like, tensions have been really high in the past 5 years, and it seems like suddenly everybody is writing political stuff. I remember, when I first started, like 15 years ago, when I first started writing, the thing was, don't be political. Politics and literature should not, separate thing. And now it seems like there's a lot of urging to be political, find that political sentiment in your work. So if a writer wants to pursue that, how do they successfully make sure they've hit the mark and they're not just ranting on the page?
Well, it really is a question of judging one's own work, and I think that is really hard to do. I would recommend finding readers you trust to exchange work with, who will give you honest feedback. Because if you are venting, there's a usefulness to that. There's a utility to it, but then just put it in a drawer or burn it,
That can be the pre-first draft
ceremony. Something cathartic. But for writing to work, I think you can't tell people how to feel. And that goes for fiction, essays, any kind of prose. If you're telling your reader how to feel, that the reader is going to feel distanced. So I would say, take a look at the way the emotions are coming out in the writing. Is it emerging from events, from interactions, from, is it emerging organically, or is it being laid on top of the story, or is the narrator using too many emotion words? I'm not sure I can truly explain it without giving examples. But the more that you tell people how to feel in a work, the more you distance them.
Yeah.
So that a lot of times is why, you know, a diatribe doesn't really work.
It's really interesting.
Maybe in humor.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's what you're saying makes me think of introducing an element of ambiguity in the work, perhaps, even if you're in your heart you don't feel ambivalent, but somehow you know, opening up possibilities for nuance in the work.
Well, I think that without saying that we need to like the protagonist, because I don't believe that. I think that if the writer has dug deep enough, there will be some empathy there.
Yeah.
A character can't be flat. And that is actually one of the more frequent pieces of advice we give people when we ask for revisions, is to dig deeper in one place or another in the work. That is, it's not always enough just to state something.
And we have a question here from Marianne. Just what is your word count for nonfiction and fiction?
We say up to 3,000 words, but the fact is we've published pieces that are longer than that. We've probably published things between 4,500 words. But I would urge you to look at your work, whatever genre it is, and say, can I cut 500 words from this? Because if you do, it might be a tighter, better work. And not necessarily though. Some pieces need to be that long. Sometimes it's warranted. So decide. And again, I strongly recommend trying to develop, if you don't have a writing group, exchange your work with a trusted reader who can tell you whether it feels baggy.
And I neglected to say this earlier, but anyone, if you're tuning in and you have a question, just go ahead and type it into the chat and I'll work the question into the conversation. And now I completely forgot what my next question was. Oh no, you mentioned working with writers. So can you talk about your process there? Is it common for you to work with writers on revision?
It's pretty common for us to ask for a little bit of revision, maybe less so in fiction than in nonfiction, and probably less so in poetry. But I know that all of our editors ask for revisions commonly, and depending on the level of revision we think is needed, we might ask the writer if they're willing to revise and come back with another version before we accept it. If we think that it's close, then we'll accept it and ask for revisions. I really enjoy, I mean, that's a part of it that I really enjoy. I really enjoy working with writers to get their piece to, the best level it can be, without doing anything to detract from their voice. We don't want, it's not ours, it's theirs. And we would like them to put their best foot forward. So that's why I'm an editor. Honestly, that's what I enjoy doing.
Sure.
And especially enjoy discovering new and emerging writers. We just had someone who got a notable in the Best American Essays, and it was his first published essay. And he's a retired auto worker. He's
nice.
So I love stories like that.
Yeah, congrats. That's
I guess the other thing, let's see if I have some other thoughts on the other thing that often happens with essays. Sometimes they're too broad. They try to cover too broad a subject area. And I would say focus in and get particular. And even in essays, remember that you need tension and conflict and a narrative arc. You know, those story features need to also appear in creative nonfiction. I mean, I hate to say this, but I'm sure that some people who submit read the journal. And I'm also sure that some don't. It couldn't possibly be easier considering it's online and it's free. So definitely take a look before you submit, and you'll see what a great range of work we do. And if you're not sure, send it to us. You know, you never know. And also for people who may have submitted before, just because we didn't take one thing doesn't mean we won't take the next thing. It happens all the time. And I want to mention that for submissions, we take poetry and fiction submissions through Submittable, and those submissions are free. And for essays, humor, and visual art, we prefer that you query first to our general mailbox so that we can see, you know, whether the topic seems along the lines of, you know, something that would work for us.
What kinds of things are you seeing a lot of in submissions right now?
You asked about humor before.
I think,
what are we seeing a lot? I was going to say, if I go back for a second, because I didn't answer your question about humor. I love getting humor. We had published a lot of humor for early on, and we haven't gotten any in a while, and maybe everyone's just tired. I wouldn't be surprised. And humor is hard. It's hard to do it well.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. It's really hard to do it well. We had a humor piece during when we did our scenes from the pandemic series that was quite good. But yeah, everyone is fatigued. So we would like to get more humor. And one of the things about humor that was pointed out in that essay early on about humor and fascism is that fascists don't like to be laughed at. And they don't generally have a sense of humor about themselves. And that's what makes it a sort of powerful weapon.
So in terms of what you're seeing a lot of in submissions now, like what are if you could sort of identify people's dominant concerns right now?
Oh gosh. I don't really, well, we were seeing a lot of pandemic related pieces. But I can't say that there's one particular thing. I'm sorry.
No, that's actually good. Yeah, it's interesting. It's spread because I think of your magazine as sort of like a curator of our historical moment. I think all lit mags provide that role to some degree, but because it's so tied to politics and current events, you're really kind of keeping a record of what artists, what are the primary concerns of artists
well
now?
I would say that people are worried about democracy.
Yeah.
For sure. And we all are. But yeah, and that's a really good point. And thank you for saying that. That's something we really want to do. We like that we were able to be nimble and respond to what's going on, like on January 6th, we were able to publish a poem about January 6th. And we were, you know, when the lockdowns were first starting in March 2020, Karen Bender had the idea of doing a pandemic series, you know, of first person pieces from people around the world. And my first reaction was, oh God, are people really going to want to read about them? But of course, that's all they wanted to read about. And that's all they wanted to write about for a while. So we had some really wonderful, wonderful pieces then about that. And in fact, I've been thinking that I'd like to revisit some of those writers and see what's happening now, 2 years later, almost.
Do you ever come across works that sort of speak to the theme of resistance, but are different maybe than the point of view that you and the editors hold, or that you may not necessarily agree with the point of view of the writer, but it's a beautiful piece? Would you consider something like that?
Sure. We don't have to agree with we don't have to agree with what we publish. I will say we're not going to publish you know, ultra right-wing manifestos. No, that's not our role.
Yeah.
There are plenty of people doing that. So we're not.
Yeah, I was thinking like as an example,
open-minded.
Yeah, like a piece. You know, like it seems like a lot of people, you know, they oppose drilling in the Arctic, you know, but if there was this beautiful short story where, you know, the writer was an activist in favor of Arctic drilling, if it was beautifully written.
You froze for a second.
I was just thinking of a sort of like environmentally themed piece where the writer was maybe where a character was making a very strong case for drilling in the Arctic. And his big act of resistance was to support a pipeline, you know, which it's kind of a controversial thing. And like many, you know, people on the left to oppose that. But if it's really well done, even though it's not a, you know, maybe a point of view that the editors share, but the piece is successful and the character is interesting, if you would consider a piece like that.
If it falls within our theme categories, we would accept it. I could see, for instance, I mean, part of I'm, you know, personally opposed to new pipelines, but part of the problem with that is the employment aspect,
right?
And the time that it might take for new technologies, renewable technologies to take up the slack and provide employment to people who might otherwise be out of work if the pipeline isn't built. So that is a point of view that I think would be valuable to see. And because we have to think about these things. Each solution to a problem causes 12 other problems. Right. It's just, everything is so interconnected. And it's very easy to be for something or against something, but then have this ripple effect that how do you manage that, and how do you hold all those ideas in your head, and how do you have a point of view? You have to be very, I think you have to be very open-minded, to consider all these angles, and I would like to see work like that.
Interesting. Okay. And a question from Judith: are poetry submissions open now?
Poetry submissions reopen on March 1st. We have a big backlog in poetry, and that it's part of it is because of the demands of the past couple of years. Just our staff is really stretched thin, and so it just wasn't fair to people. we needed to close to submissions for a couple of months so that we could catch up, because we're literally reading stuff from last spring right now in poetry. So I apologize to everyone who is waiting. We are still open to fiction, essays, everything else. In fiction, we're reading a few months back at this point.
And a question from Colette: are you tired of pandemic pieces at this point?
No, I mean, we're all tired of the pandemic. But it's our reality.
If we stop publishing pandemic pieces, can we stop the pandemic?
You know what, people are going to write what they're going to write. And honestly, if you have been able to write in the last couple of years, more power to you, you know, whatever you can write. It's been such a difficult time. I mean, not just the last 2 years, honestly, it's longer than that. But if you've been able to write a piece that is ready to be published, great. If it's about yes, I'm still happy to see pieces about the pandemic.
And you have a special section dedicated to pandemic.
We do, yeah, scenes from the pandemic. Yeah.
Some of which are quite funny and innovative. So that's something to think about, that they don't all have to be like heavy morose pieces.
You froze there, but yeah, they don't all have to be straight prose. Or they can be structurally inventive. And I would encourage actually structural invention on any topic. And I did I mention graphic novels and graphic memoir, because graphic fiction and nonfiction, because we also have done some of that, and I would like to do more of that. Sometimes there are technical issues with how it looks on the page, but we can usually finesse that.
And you publish, it's pretty rigorous publishing schedule. Can you talk about that? Is it, it's on a rolling basis?
Yeah.
Can you talk about the decision behind that, and if you've had any regrets?
Well, we felt that an online venue lent itself to, rather than, date-based issues, to having, rolling publication. And one of the main benefits of that is it allows us to be very responsive if we have work that's topical and current, and we want to get it out there now. Or for instance, there was something, when there's something particular going on, sometimes we'll also reach into our archive and republish something. But if we have a number of works we've accepted, we can try to publish them when it seems appropriate to the political weather, to quote Daisy. So that is something that we really try to do. And in the beginning, like I said, we were publishing maybe 3 pieces a week, and that was too much. Yeah. It got to be too much. So now it's more like probably once a week. So yeah, this week we published a poem, actually a climate change related poem. And next week we have an interview coming out with Lan Samantha Chang. And yeah, so we try, and also because we're such a small staff, when we do decide to publish something, often we can get it up there quickly. No, you don't have to wait months to see the work published, which I think is nice for writers. Yeah. We do, I mean, we haven't specifically mentioned this, but I think most people know now that we can't pay for submissions. We can't pay for work. And none of us get paid, and that's not an excuse at all. We just don't have any money. And, the overhead expense of keeping the website functioning, and other administrative expenses just involved in running the website itself those are our, costs. And none of us, we don't, I hate asking people for money. I just really I don't like doing that. We need money and we live off, off the donations. That's how we survive. And we got a grant from CLMP, and early on we got a grant from ALP, and that was a huge help. And in fact, the grant from CLMP enabled us to give some awards to, I think we gave 7 awards in the pandemic to works in the pandemic series. And we give Editor's Choice Awards each year, and we're about to do that actually later this week, 1 each for creative nonfiction, fiction, and poetry, to a work that we published in the last year, and each one gets $100. So that's something we try to do so that we can use what little funds we have to pay someone. The other thing we do is we nominate for awards. We nominate to Best American and Pushcart awards. And we've even done things like write references for awards and residencies for people who published with us, if we can. So we try, and we try also to promote on social media. And when a contributor has a book coming out or an award nomination, we want to know about it so that we can, we can help announce their book and their award and all of that. So we try to do what we can to help our writers get exposure. And we're all writers ourselves, so we know what it's like.
And you mentioned at the beginning soliciting work. Was that just something you did early on, or is that something that's
we had to do it early on because no one knew who we were. So when we were publishing initially, we wanted to come out with we wanted to launch with a certain volume of pieces. And we do still occasionally solicit work, but most of the work that we publish comes in over the transom.
And is there anything that you do not want to see? I know editors always say like no hatred, no violence, but more specifically,
I'm okay with violence.
Or no gratuitous violence.
Right, no gratuitous violence.
But is there anything that you, just to give writers a little inside tip, is there something that you're seeing just a lot of right now, either aesthetically, like please stop beginning your stories with an alarm clock going off, or a particular theme that you feel like, we're all set on, pieces that deal with, I don't know.
I don't have a particular theme that I think I'm seeing too much of right now. I guess the kinds of things, well, I would say for stories and essays, make sure the beginning is really the beginning. And yeah, I would say if it's a short story, don't open with somebody having a dream.
Or maybe not end with a dream either.
Yeah, there are exceptions that work,
of course.
So I don't want to say never, but generally, show, don't tell. But that's really not true.
But there's nothing that you're seeing in excess of. It's not like people are sending like just in too many stories about the pandemic or,
No, I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
No, I don't think so. I guess, well, it's really just about paying attention to what we publish. And we publish lots of different things. So there's probably a place where many writers can fit. It's just the most common reason for turning something down is that it doesn't fit our theme.
Mhm.
Or on the other hand, it's, well, it's the writing, you know.
Yeah. Sure. And we have a question from Pam. Thank you for sharing your time and knowledge. And do you feel the channels of social media to be advantageous to deepening your connection with readers and contributors?
When you say we, do you mean us, the journal, or writers?
Pam, Pam, do you want to clarify? Okay, both.
Okay. Well, I guess a lot of people learn about books and writers and journals through social media these days. So we do have a presence on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, even though my presence is only on Twitter. Is it important? Well, I think it's helpful as a writer to connect with the writing community on social media, even just for support. But as far as like marketing, I recently read a piece that said social media doesn't actually sell that many books. I don't know
I think that's
how
right.
it does for literary journals. I think obviously when a lot of people share a work, it gets seen, but it may only be that particular work gets seen and not, you know, the spillover to other works that are published in the same place may or may not be there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a toss-up. I would say, do it if you want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Really,
Yeah.
do what you're comfortable with, because then you'll be better at it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, have fun with it.
And Marianne says, sounds like your magazine is truly a labor of love. Really appreciate your dedication.
Oh, it is. It really is.
Yeah. So again, let's say for a story writer, and going back to this idea of a piece being sort of having political weather, which I love that phrase. Have you published pieces that are not, or would you accept a piece, let's say it's not overtly political, but there's something in it that sort of touches on the kernel of resistance, maybe like a wife, you know, she finally that morning decides she's not going to make the coffee for her really, you know, mean and tyrannical husband, and that's it. She doesn't make the coffee and leaves the house, and that's the end of the story. And it's not overtly political, but it sort of goes back to what you were saying, like every personal decision can have political echoes. So would you say a story like that is really focused on the personal is not right for the magazine? Or would you say
we've published a lot of stories that are focused on the personal. I mean,
okay.
Really, that's what we want, is the personal. I'm trying to remember now what Karen said, because she sort of said it well. Narrative that gives a window into an individual or world. You know, and Daisy had said individual experience as it intersects with community experience. So I guess if we get a sense that there is some subtext, that is helpful. But take a look at what we've published, because we've published works like that. Even, in fact, last week or so, we published a piece called Signals, which was really a collection of different voices and all like personal stories like that, that still seem to me to have that political weather.
Yeah.
And again, it is a case of, you know, it's possible to see a political angle sometimes when it might not be obvious.
So a question I ask all editors, and I'm particularly curious because of your rigorous publishing schedule, and you're also a writer yourself, and maybe are you a teacher as well?
Sometimes.
Yeah. Occasional teacher. How do you avoid getting burned out? Like, what keeps you going? What keeps you, it is a labor of love, you know, it's obviously very intense. and maybe even you're coming across works that are fairly intense. So how do you stay in the game? What keeps you in it?
Well, one thing that helps is this right here.
First reader, right?
I think, yeah, I think all editors should have pets.
Yeah.
If they can. When I'm feeling overwhelmed, just going like, grab the dog.
Yeah.
But yeah, Daisy and Karen both teach and write books and do a crazy amount of stuff. And like I said before, all of our editorial assistants, same thing. They're all doing multiple things. Everybody's so busy. I also volunteer with an artist residency. I've been doing that for years, and I'm in the middle. I'm deep into a book project right now. So it's a lot. How do we juggle? How do we avoid burnout? Well, sometimes we don't. I think I sort of try to compartmentalize, like, this is the day I'm going to work on X. Or after 3 o'clock, I'm going to work on Y. That's how I do it. I keep things structured.
Yeah.
I try to impose a structure so that I don't get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
But it's true that we all get behind in various ways as a result of all of these different demands.
Yeah, but the magazine,
and I don't have young children at home right now. Some people do, and that's even harder, I think.
Yeah, but the magazine itself is still, it sounds like it's incredibly exciting to you, and it's growing.
Yeah, it is. We are hoping to do a redesign on the website. We were fortunate enough to have, I don't think I mentioned Will Amato, who designed our website for almost nothing in the beginning, which we never would have been able to afford. But so that was really, we were grateful for that. He worked really hard on it. And but we're sort of getting to the point where it's 5 years old, but that's old by internet standards. And we'd like to do something a little more dynamic. So probably means a fundraiser coming soon.
Yeah. And speaking of, so what else is on the horizon? It sounds like submissions are open on an ongoing basis.
Fiction is open, essays, humor, visual art, everything except poetry is open right now. Poetry will reopen in March. We may close fiction, but not right away. Not in March. We may close fiction briefly later in the year. So we never did that before, but we realized, like, well, that would be a way to feel less overwhelmed. And we also feel like it's not fair to have such a backlog, to make people wait so long. We've all had that experience of waiting a long time, and I don't want to be the cause.
And you mentioned this earlier, but I just want to drive the point home that if a writer tries you and they are rejected, they should keep trying you. Is there a wait time? Sometimes magazines say wait 6 months, wait a year, or can a writer just send your next piece?
Wait till you've heard on the first piece you submit.
Do writers do that? Do they send you a, oh wow, okay.
Yes, we've had people who will send something every few weeks. Just wait till you've heard on the one so that you know what it is. May not have worked that first time. And try us again. And we do, there are also people we've published more than once over the years. So that's also something that we're willing to do. Yeah.
Okay. And are you ever looking for readers? Is there a way to get more involved with the magazine?
Yeah, we're always looking for help. Like we are always looking for some kind of help, either submission readers or with social media or our newsletter, which we put out an occasional newsletter, which is really not, we don't want to spam anyone. It's really just, here's what we've published the last couple of weeks, and here's the latest contributor news. We're trying to include contributor news more often. And so that will never come more than once a week, and probably less than once a week. But we could use some help with that.
Yeah.
And if anyone is a champion website designer or knows how to do some of the nitty-gritty technical stuff on the back end, we could use help with that.
Great. And people can find you at scoundreltime.com.
Yes.
And on Twitter at it's almost a test because editors never seem to know their own magazine Twitter handle. So at this point, I'm just pop quiz.
It's at Scoundrel Time.
Okay. At Scoundrel Time. Okay.
Yeah, and on and I think on Instagram it's Scoundrel Time Lit Mag or something like that. Like, and on Facebook it's Scoundrel Time.
Okay, great. Wonderful. So everybody should go to the site, check it out, read stories, read poetry, listen to some music, read some humor. I think we all appreciate more humor these days, and follow them on Twitter and send your work. And thank you so much, Paula, for taking the time today. And thank you guys for coming out. Thank you, especially also for putting up with these technical glitches.
Thank you, Becky, so much. It was really fun. And I appreciate all the questions from everyone.
Sure.